A shadow fell across the courtroom's polished floor. The low murmur of voices hushed as Sarah Chen took her seat at the defendant's table, alone. A solitary figure in a system designed to intimidate. With steady hands and eyes that revealed nothing, she placed a single manila folder before her. The police officer who'd arrested her smirked from across the room, confident in his power, blind to her truth. He had no idea who he was dealing with, but he would. Soon, everyone would. Before we dive into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from. The Municipal Court of Riverdale buzzed with the usual Monday morning activity. Fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over the wood-paneled walls, highlighting the American flag drooping in the corner. Sarah Chen sat with perfect posture, her breathing measured and calm. Nothing about her appearance. Simple gray blouse, navy slacks, practical ponytail suggested anything remarkable. Judge Martinez shuffled through papers on his bench, occasionally glancing at the clock. Case number 247B, County versus Chen, alleged obstruction and resisting arrest. The court clerk nodded, making a notation. Defendant is present, Your Honor. Officer Brad Thornton straightened his uniform as he entered through the side door. At 42, his once athletic frame had thickened, but his swagger remained intact. He nodded to the bailiff, a familiar gesture between colleagues, before taking the witness stand. "Good morning, Officer Thornton," the prosecutor said, a young woman in a crisp suit. "Please describe the events of May 15th. Thornton cleared his throat. "I observed the defendant's vehicle roll through a stop sign on Maple Street. When I initiated a traffic stop, the subject immediately became defensive." Sarah's expression remained neutral, her fingers lightly tapping the table. "The defendant," Thornton continued, "refused to properly identify herself and became belligerent when asked for identification. When her behavior escalated, I determined she posed a potential threat." The prosecutor nodded. "What happened next?" "She made threatening movements that required me to take defensive action," Thornton stated, his voice carrying the practiced confidence of someone who'd testified dozens of times. "I had to forcibly remove her from the vehicle for officer safety." Judge Martinez turned to Sarah. "Miss Chen, do you have representation today?" "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor," Sarah replied softly, her voice carrying just enough to reach the bench without seeming forceful. Thornton's mouth twitched into a smirk. Amateurs representing themselves, his favorite kind of defendant. The prosecutor finished her questioning with a satisfied nod. "Nothing further, Your Honor. Miss Chen, you may cross-examine the witness," Judge Martinez said, his tone neutral but his eyes curious. Sarah stood, her movements deliberate. "Officer Thornton, could you please identify the location of this alleged stop sign?" "Corner of Maple and Pine," Thornton answered confidently. "Interesting." Sarah opened her manila folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit this municipal map showing that Maple and Pine don't intersect in Riverdale. Maple ends at Oak Street." A few spectators exchanged glances as Thornton's face flushed. "Perhaps I misspoke. It was Maple and Oak." "Officer Thornton, could you explain why your body camera was turned off during our interaction?" Thornton shifted in his seat. "Technical malfunction. A malfunction that's occurred during 17 traffic stops this year, all resulting in complaints that were dismissed?" Sarah asked, producing another document. The judge leaned forward with interest as murmurs swept through the courtroom. "Objection, Your Honor!" The prosecutor jumped to her feet. "Relevance? I'm establishing a pattern of behavior," Sarah responded calmly. "Public records show Officer Thornton has the highest number of malfunctioning body cameras in the department." "I'll allow it," Judge Martinez said. "Answer the question, officer." "Equipment fails sometimes," Thornton snapped, "and civilians don't understand proper police procedure." Sarah nodded as if considering this. When you approached my vehicle, did you inform me why I was being stopped? Of course. Standard procedure. Your Honor, Sarah said, I'd like to submit evidence that contradicts Officer Thornton's testimony. She produced a small flash drive. This contains footage from my dashboard camera, which was recording during the entire incident. The color drained from Thornton's face as the bailiff took the drive. Judge Martinez peered over his glasses. Bailiff, please set up the evidence. Heads turned toward the courtroom screen as the video began playing. The footage showed Sarah's car coming to a complete stop at an intersection before proceeding. Moments later, flashing lights appeared behind her. She immediately pulled over. Officer Thornton approached, his posture aggressive. License and registration. May I ask why I'm being stopped, officer? Sarah's voice was calm and respectful on the recording. You ran a stop sign. ID, now. I believe I came to a complete stop, sir, but... The video showed Thornton cutting her off. Step out of the vehicle. Officer, I'm happy to provide my... Without warning, Thornton yanked the door open and reached in, his movements rough and unnecessary. I said get out! Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the video showed Thornton practically dragging Sarah from her car. I'm complying, officer. Sarah's recorded voice remained steady, even as she was manhandled. There's no need for force. Judge Martinez's expression darkened as he watched. The prosecutor stared at her notes, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Stop the video, the judge ordered. He turned to Thornton. This directly contradicts your testimony. Thornton's jaw tightened. The camera angle doesn't show everything. It shows enough, Judge Martinez retorted. Miss Chen, please continue. Sarah stood again. Officer Thornton, when I attempted to show you my identification after you physically removed me from my vehicle, what did you do? I secured the scene, Thornton muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. By secured, do you mean you slammed me against my car and cuffed me without reading my rights? You were resisting, the judge interrupted. Play the rest of the video. The footage resumed, showing Sarah being roughly pushed against her vehicle while attempting to reach for her wallet. Not once did she resist or raise her voice. Your Honor, Sarah said as the video ended, I'd like to introduce myself properly to the court. She handed the bailiff an official document. I am Commander Sarah Chen, Navy SEAL Team 6, currently on leave, visiting family. A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom. Judge Martinez studied the document, his eyebrows rising steadily. Commander Chen is one of only 3 women to ever complete SEAL training, the judge stated for the record. She currently holds the rank of commander with top security clearance. Officer Thornton's mouth hung open, his confident demeanor crumbling. I've served 4 tours overseas, Sarah added, her voice still measured. I've received multiple commendations for my service, including the Bronze Star and Purple Heart. Judge Martinez peered at Thornton over his glasses. Officer, falsifying police reports is a serious offense, as is violating the civil rights of citizens. The police chief, who had been sitting quietly in the back row, stood up. His face was thunderous. Your Honor, the department will be conducting a full investigation into Officer Thornton's conduct, he announced. This behavior does not represent our values or standards. Thornton's face had gone from red to ashen. I didn't know. That's precisely the point, officer, Sarah interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. You shouldn't treat anyone this way, regardless of who they are. The prosecutor cleared her throat. Your Honor, in light of this evidence, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Commander Chen. Motion granted, Judge Martinez declared without hesitation. Commander Chen, this court apologizes for the inconvenience and disrespect you've experienced. Sarah nodded once, gathering her documents with the same methodical precision she applied to everything in life. "Case dismissed," the judge announced, banging his gavel. "Officer Thornton, remain in the courtroom. We have matters to discuss." As Sarah turned to leave, she noticed several officers approaching her, their expressions a mixture of awe and embarrassment. "Commander," one female officer said, "I want to apologize on behalf of—" "No need," Sarah replied. "Just ensure this doesn't happen to others." That would be the best apology. Outside the courthouse, sunlight washed over the stone steps as reporters gathered, alerted by the courthouse grapevine about the morning's events. "Commander Chen," called a local news reporter, rushing forward with a microphone. "Can you comment on?" "No statements today," Sarah replied politely but firmly, moving past the small crowd. A young officer caught up with her, slightly out of breath. "Commander, Chief Williams asked if you'd be willing to speak with him before you leave town." Sarah paused, considering. "When?" "He suggested coffee at Riverside Cafe. Said he'd meet you there in 30 minutes if that works." She nodded once. "I'll be there." The cafe sat by the town's small river, outdoor tables shaded by broad umbrellas. Chief Williams was already waiting when she arrived, his weathered face creased with concern. "Commander Chen," he stood, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." Sarah shook it firmly. "Chief." After they ordered black coffee for both, Williams leaned forward. "I want to personally apologize for Officer Thornton's behavior. There's no excuse." "You're right. There isn't," Sarah replied evenly. "But I suspect this isn't just about me." Eyes crinkled. "Perceptive. Thornton's been problematic for years. Complaints filed, then mysteriously withdrawn. Witnesses changing stories." He sighed. "Small-town politics. His uncle was mayor for 20 years. And you've been looking for leverage. We have 7 pending misconduct cases that needed something solid to break the pattern." Williams studied her. "Your video and testimony might be that catalyst." Sarah sipped her coffee. "I didn't come to town looking to expose police misconduct." "Of course not. You came to visit your mother," Williams said, surprising her. "Mrs. Chen at the senior community. Wonderful gardener. Makes exceptional almond cookies for our community meetings." A small smile touched Sarah's lips. "That sounds like Mom." "Look, I'm not asking you to become involved in our internal investigation, but your statement already filed with the court gives us grounds to reopen several cases." Their coffees arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. "What happens to Thornton?" Sarah finally asked. "Administrative leave, pending investigation. With your evidence, I expect termination and possible criminal charges for falsifying reports." Sarah nodded, watching a family walking along the riverside path, a father teaching his daughter to skip stones. "I've been fighting enemies abroad for 15 years, she said quietly. "Comes with the territory. But civilians shouldn't have to fear those sworn to protect them." "No, they shouldn't," Williams agreed solemnly. The courthouse scene became yesterday's news as Sarah found herself in Chief Williams' office the following afternoon. The walls displayed commendations and community service awards, evidence of a department that aspired to better standards than Thornton represented. "We've reopened 3 cases based on your testimony," Williams explained, spreading folders across his desk. "All involve similar complaints against Thornton." Sarah reviewed the documents, her trained eye quickly identifying patterns. "He targets specific demographics, primarily women and minorities driving alone." "Exactly. But victims were intimidated into dropping complaints." Williams rubbed his forehead. "The mayor wants this handled quietly. And you?" "I want justice," Williams said firmly. Which is why I have a proposition. Sarah raised an eyebrow. We're implementing new training protocols for our officers. De-escalation, proper procedure, community engagement. Williams leaned forward. Would you consider conducting a seminar before you return to duty? I'm not a police trainer, Chief. No, but you understand discipline, procedure, and maintaining composure under pressure. Sarah considered this, fingers tapping lightly on her knee. 3 days, that's all I can offer. 3 days with someone of your caliber would be invaluable. The training room buzzed with tension the next morning. 20 officers sat in uncomfortable chairs, expressions ranging from interest to open hostility. Sarah stood at the front in simple civilian clothes, jeans and a navy button-down, nothing indicating her military rank. I'm Sarah Chen, she began. I'm here at Chief Williams' request to share perspectives on de-escalation and situational assessment. A male officer in the back snorted. What qualifies a civilian to tell us how to do our jobs? Sarah met his gaze calmly. 16 years in naval special warfare, including 4 combat tours and 7 hostage extraction missions. The room fell silent. I've operated in environments where a single wrong decision meant death, for me, my team, or innocent civilians. Her voice remained measured. I've diffused situations with armed hostiles without firing a shot. And yes, I've also made mistakes that haunt me. She moved closer to the officers. This isn't about telling you how to do your jobs. It's about sharing tools that might keep you and the people you encounter safer. Officer Rivera, a young woman in the front row, raised her hand. Commander, how do you maintain control when someone's actively resisting? By first determining if they're actually resisting or just frightened, Sarah replied. She moved to the center of the room. May I have a volunteer? Rivera stood, moving to join her. When someone tenses up, Sarah demonstrated by having Rivera grasp her wrist. It's often an instinctive fear response, not defiance. She showed how tension could be misinterpreted as resistance, then demonstrated techniques to de-escalate. The difference between nervousness and true resistance is detectable in body language. Sarah's voice carried throughout the room. Most people aren't trained fighters. They telegraph their intentions. For the next hour, she ran practical scenarios, breaking down threat assessment into observable patterns. Officers gradually engaged, asking questions, testing techniques. What about when there's no time to analyze? Challenged Officer Mercer, a veteran cop with 20 years experience. Split-second decisions save lives. Absolutely, Sarah agreed. That's why we train situational awareness until it becomes instinct. She addressed the entire group. The goal isn't to eliminate force, but to ensure it's proportional and necessary. By lunchtime, most officers were actively participating, even the initially skeptical ones. Sarah noticed Chief Williams observing from the doorway, a satisfied expression on his face. During the afternoon session, Sarah distributed scenario cards. Each card describes a situation you might encounter. Work with your partner to determine the appropriate response level. As officers engaged with the exercise, the training room filled with thoughtful discussion instead of the morning's tension. As the day ended, Officer Rivera approached Sarah. Commander, thank you. I've been on the force just 6 months, and sometimes the older officers, she trailed off. Experience is valuable, Sarah said, but so is fresh perspective. The next 2 days followed a similar pattern. Initial resistance softening into engagement. By the final afternoon, officers were voluntarily demonstrating scenarios they'd encountered, seeking feedback on handling them better. During lunch on the 3rd day, Sarah sat alone, reviewing her notes when Mercer joined her. "Never thought I'd be taking pointers from a squid," he said gruffly, using the nickname for Navy personnel. Sarah's mouth quirked slightly. "And I never planned on training cops." Mercer studied her. "Why'd you do it?" "Same reason you became an officer, I imagine. To serve." He nodded slowly. 20 years in, it's easy to forget that part. He leaned forward. "Thornton made us all look bad. Internal Affairs found videos he'd deleted from the system. Dozens of encounters like yours. One bad officer doesn't define a department. No, but leadership's response does." Mercer stood. "Williams is cutting the cancer out. Thornton's been formally charged. Falsifying reports, excessive force, witness intimidation." When Sarah returned to her mother's home that evening, she found Chief Williams waiting on the porch. "You've transformed that training room," he said without preamble. "They're good officers who needed reminders, not transformation." Williams handed her an envelope. "The mayor asked me to deliver this." Inside was a formal letter of apology from the city, along with documentation that all records related to her arrest had been expunged. "The prosecutor who handled your case resigned yesterday," Williams added. "Said she couldn't continue after seeing how the system worked from the other side. The mayor also wants to offer you a position." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "As?" "Civilian consultant on police reform. The town council unanimously approved it." She shook her head. "My leave ends in 10 days. I have responsibilities elsewhere." Williams nodded, unsurprised. "I figured. Worth asking, though." 6 months later, Sarah stood at attention on the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln. Admiral Hayes pinned the Navy Commendation Medal to her uniform. Commander Chen's leadership during Operation Nightfall resulted in the successful extraction of 3 hostages under extreme conditions, he announced to the assembled crew. Her judgment and composure under fire exemplify the highest traditions of naval service. Later, in the officers' mess, her team gathered to celebrate. "So, Commander," Lieutenant Rodriguez asked, "any truth to the rumor you spent your leave reforming an entire police department?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Just shared some perspective. Classic Chen understatement," Captain Morris commented, joining them. "The training program you developed has been implemented in 3 counties now." Sarah looked surprised. "What training program?" "Your de-escalation protocols. Williams sent them up the chain. They've reduced use of force incidents by 30%. Sarah considered this as she sipped her coffee. Sometimes the most important battles weren't fought with weapons, but with words and example. As the celebration wound down, Sarah stepped onto the carrier's deck. The vast ocean stretched before her, stars reflected in its dark surface. Across the country in Riverdale, a new class of police cadets listened as Officer Rivera demonstrated the Chen Protocol for threat assessment. The department's excessive force complaints had dropped to 0, a statistic that made national news. Chief Williams kept the framed letter on his office wall. Real strength isn't measured by how much force you apply, but by how rarely you need to use it. It was signed simply, Commander S. Chen. Sarah watched the horizon, reflecting on the unexpected ripple effects of that traffic stop. When she'd stood in that courtroom, she hadn't aimed to start a movement, just to stand her ground. Yet sometimes, standing your ground was enough to shift the earth beneath everyone's feet. She thought about power, how it could corrupt when misused, and how it could transform when shared. The most valuable weapon in any arsenal wasn't intimidation, but integrity. The moon cast a silver path across the water, a reminder that even the darkest seas could show the way forward if you knew how to read them.